Good evening. My name is Thomas. I have the great honor of being the president for the Society for the History of Technology. We are absolutely thrilled to be in Milan. I have been reading about Milan for my whole professional life, and I know Milan only as a motorway hotel. That was the wrong way of getting to know Milan, although the motorway is appropriate enough with the futurists and their fascination with automobiles. But we arrived 2 days ago and walked the streets down to Bar Magenta, and it was like being in a place that you know, but you, of course, don't know because you've never been there. And so we saw futurists at the hotel. We are, 50 meters from the Last Supper. We are a short walk to this magnificent facility here. So we are just simply positively thrilled to be in Milan. We are excited to have a dynamic and vibrant scholarly program, and with the theme trying to connect art, technology, and design and to explore the interfaces, this is a very exciting plenary session with speakers that I think will be interesting, stimulating, and provocative. So my main job is to basically have people sit down. Yes, if you're coming in, it's a good time to please sit down because the formal program is just about to begin. And we will have a welcome from the museum's executive director.
I think so.
So, excuse me if I have a very formal and official welcome for you, but we will have the pleasure in a short time to have a contribute, and we can listen to our creative and disrupting friends here on the stage. Welcome to everybody. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, a warm welcome to you all, and a special welcome to our guest speakers who have accepted to join us and share their experience in tonight's opening plenary. We are honored to have the chance to host you here in our museum, which in the words of our founder, Guido Uccelli, we interpret as the museum of the becoming of the world. In fact, since our opening in 1953, we strive daily to act as a living agora, as a meeting point that brings together past and present, involving different members of society, from researchers to citizens, to the worlds of production and innovation. In looking at the new definition of museum, which is currently being discussed within the ICOM community, we recognize ourselves among those that aim to be democratizing, inclusive, and polyphonic space for critical dialogue about the past and the futures. Acknowledging and addressing the conflicts and challenges of the present. Our role is to collect, preserve, research, interpret, exhibit, ultimately trying to enhance the understanding of the world. Through the combined work of our cultural heritage and education departments, our museum builds experiences that offer a critical historical perspective on science and technology in relation to society, in order to better interpret the contemporary issues of the present. The historical heritage we preserve, expressed by its materiality, but also bearing the trace of the immaterial culture, offers a great potential for research, reflection, representation, and public participation, because it is a source, shared or contested, of memory, identity, cohesion, creativity, a powerful tool capable of activating transversal relationship within society, connecting the local with the global and the present with the past and the future. Our origins and Italian cultural setting in which we were founded and in which we act resonate deeply with the theme we proposed for this year's meeting, exploring the interface between technology, art, and design. As hybrid organisms that stand between the world of research and that of our living contemporary society, we always need to find new ways of talking about science and technology. In this perspective, alongside the technical scientific research communities and the scientific and technological heritage experts, the contribution of history, anthropology, philosophy, sociology, and the arts are crucial. In our very soul is the rejection of polarized views of knowledge, and the fundamental assumption of science is culture. This meeting will be an extraordinary opportunity to understand and discuss how traditions, technology, art, design, and craft have blended together in a cross-fertilization process. The historical and contemporary perspective of the studies presented here will also help better understand with today's engagement programs proactively encourage the collaboration among artists, scientists, engineers, architects, and craft people. A warm thank you to all of you for contributing to this complex and valuable debate. A special thank to the local organization committee chaired by Anna Guagnini, who supports us daily in our research and who has created the conditions for the SHOT community to be here today. We hope you will enjoy Milano, the museum, and the 2019 SHOT annual meeting. Welcome to everybody. This is your home.
Grazie. Are you able to hear me? All right, we've already achieved one success, so that's wonderful. Well, mille grazie, benvenuto a Milano. My name's Patrick McCray. I'm a professor of history at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I think this is I think I've been coming to SHOT meetings now for almost 20 years, and it's really quite a treat to be able to serve as the moderator for this plenary session. I also would like to thank Anna and Laura and their staff, as well as all the people at SHOT who've been working very hard to bring all of the pieces together that allow us to be in this room this evening. And of course, I'd especially like to thank all of you. Many of you I know have traveled quite some distance, and today also not such great weather to be here with us this evening. So welcome to our opening plenary session. We've decided to do something a little bit different this year, a bit of an experiment. So rather than having just a series of traditional opening addresses, instead we decided to plan this around a series of 4 short presentations by a quartet of experts who are working at the interface of art, design, and technology, which of course is the theme for this year's meeting. And then at the end, all things working out as planned, we will have some time for some dialogue between the 5 of us. So for the people gathered with me on stage today, what is intriguing about all of their work is how they bring attention to the studio and the gallery, the classroom, the museum, the place of fabrication, all as new and emerging places where technical experimentation and sometimes even commercial innovation is done. Sometimes this activity produces products, sometimes it calls into question the ontological nature of art and design. You'll see from some of the presentations today, opening up questions as to what exactly is being made. All of the people with me today are practitioners. That is to say, they are people active in creating new design, digital media, curating and exhibiting art. Our first presenter is Fabio Novembre. Fabio is a designer and architect. Currently, he is the artistic director of an Italian furnishing firm specializing in specific design products, which you will get to see some of. And he's also the scientific director of the Domus Academy, a leading design school here in Milan. After Fabio, we have Joachim Sauter, a digital media artist. Joachim is a professor for new media art and design at the University of Arts Berlin, and he's also an adjunct professor at UCLA in Los Angeles. Franziska Nori is a professor of curatorial practice in contemporary art, and she's also the director of the Frankfurter Kunstverein, an exhibition space in Frankfurt for contemporary art. And then finally, we have Simona Maschi. In addition to her many years teaching design, Simona is also the director of the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. Did I get that right? Okay. Where she heads a team that does consulting and operates an educational program and includes a research laboratory. So those are the four people who are with me here this evening. Just sort of to give you a sense of the shape of things to come. Each speaker has graciously agreed to keep their comments to about 10 minutes. We have a reception waiting for us. At some point, if that goes beyond much, I will gently remind people of that, but hopefully that won't become necessary. After all four of our practitioners have spoken, we will have some time for dialogue and conversation, sort of drawing on the ideas that we have heard. We decided upon looking at the room that the design of this space maybe wasn't so conducive for questions from the audience, but all of our presenters will be at the reception, so if you wish to speak with them and continue the conversation there, that would be a very convivial way to do it, perhaps with a nice snack and a glass of wine. So with that said, Fabio will be our first speaker, so andiamo, per favore.
Can you there?
Io preferisco. Sì.
All right. Welcome. So, the environment, I'm an architect and designer, so I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but they told me, Fabio, try to show as much as you can of your relationship with the digital world and technology and stuff. Okay, so this is my first slide. I was born in this place. This is my hometown. Just to tell you that it's very important to understand where you come from. I think it's very, very important. I come from a city which is famous in Italy for its Baroque. And it's not the Baroque of Rome, you know, Bernini, Borromini, that's the noble Baroque. My hometown is the poor Baroque, so that we're craftsmen doing the best they could in order to decorate these churches. And so I've been living in this environment. And that's why when I went to school, and I was surrounded by teachers saying, Fabio, remember, less is more, less is more. My idea of less was much more like this, David Croy, I think, symbolized it in a very good way, That was my less. And that's why when, I was asked actually by an American client, his name is Stuart Weitzman, to design a shoe shop. And I came out with this idea. Actually, when he came to my studio, I remember, I said, Stuart, I'm very happy that you're coming here to ask me this job, but I never did anything like that. And he said, Fabio, it's very easy. It's some shelves sticking out from the wall, 35 centimeters at different heights to put shoes on top. I said, okay, very easy, very easy. And I said, all right, I'll do one shelf, and the shelf will go crazy around the space. And that's actually what happened. And if you see the church, probably, I'm still there, you see. I mean, that's what's in your shoes, basically, because I really think that's what builds you in some way. You never have to forget where you come from, right? But then, of course, I studied many years architecture, and I have a scientific approach, so that if I have to explain all this chaos, I have a trick. These 8 pieces that combined made actually that kind of chaos. So it's a thought chaos. It's a designed chaos. And let's go on. I always try to think about, before making things, I try to think. And you know why? Actually, there is a reason for that. Because I cannot sketch. I'm not good at drawing at all. Actually, when I was a student, I took a degree. Simona remembers it very well because we were in school together. I took the degree in 1992. 1992, computers were not existing, basically, at least not in Italy. and so, given that I couldn't sketch, I couldn't work in an architectural studio to train. So that I moved to New York, I studied movie direction. So that I arrived to things after a long time. But you know why? Because I understood that before anything, you have to declare your intentions. And so that's why I wrote this book, to declare my intentions. This book is called Design Explained to My Mother. And you know why? I'm an Italian guy, right? And to explain things to your mother is basically impossible. Impossible. I remember, seriously, listen to me. I was going back to my hometown and say, Mom, I met this professor, I did this thing, I went to this conference. She was laughing at me and saying, Fabio, what can I cook you for dinner? And that's Italian mothers, right? All right. So if you try to explain design to your mother, means that you can do it for anyone else in the world. And but how could I explain? And here I translate that sentence. I have to admit that it's difficult to explain to my mother why I design a table with 171 legs. And you know, and that's what happens. How can I explain that to my mother? Impossible. So it's like, you know, it's like the snake eating his own tail, which is actually one of the most ancient symbols of sustainability. You know that, right? So 171 legs, of course, only 4 of them are holding, and so it looks like a magic trick, because actually they're not even on the perimeter, because all the rest are soft. And the hard ones, they're curved as if they're soft. So it's like a magic trick. I think that the word of digital and science has a lot to do with magic, right? But of course, my magic is more symbolical. I mean, really, in my, let's say that in my, how would you say, intentions was not to design what's up the table. The table is only a surface, 72 centimeters up from the ground. But for me, what's under the table is always very interesting. You know, when you touch feet, when you go under the table, when I was a little kid, I mean, it's like there is a word under the table. So for me, it was like a jungle. So let's say these chords, this verticality, I fall in love with I like mathematics very much. Mathematics, in some ways, you know, the digital comes from digits, comes from numbers. You know, a way of transforming reality into numbers, right? So let's go to histograms. And histograms are a very nice way of telling things. And that's why when I was called by football club in Milano, it's called AC Milan, and I was supposed to tell their story. I said, your story is like an histogram. And you have to underline the fact when you want something, when the year was terrible, you know, like a story told in histograms. I think it was very interesting, and it's also very interesting to explain to your supporters that exactly like life, histograms are basically a picture of life in numbers. And you cannot always win. You have to fail sometime. It's like your life. You cannot be up all the time, right? I can be up now. In 5 minutes, I'll be tired. So it's like up and down, up and down. And that's exactly what I wanted to explain with my communication medium, which is space. I am an architect, I'm a designer. I always say that architects and designers are one of the few knights that still fight for three-dimensionality. I mean, we work with bodies, we work with people. There is still, you know, flesh and blood. We are made of flesh and blood. And we never have to forget how actually we make children, which is a beautiful way, right? So let's go. And you see that even histograms, they get crazy. I mean, this was something I did in Shanghai a few years ago to represent Milano. It's the flag of the city. You know, the flag of the city is a red cross on a white background. And the red cross is actually the symbol of nobility. And the white background is democracy, you know, the normal people, ordinary people. So that I was putting on this stripe in space, made it three-dimensional, all the new nobility of Milan. So there was the Last Supper, three-dimensional on the left. There was Lucio Fontana. There was Umberto Boccioni. And actually, there was a right-wing government when I did it. And this was also kind of a politic manifesto. You know why? Because exactly was with Fiorenzo before, Patrick was asking us, what's the real sense of being Milanese? And the real sense of being Milanese is the right of land. We don't believe in right of blood. If you come here, you're Milanese. And these people, Lucio Fontana was Argentinian. Leonardo Da Vinci was born in Tuscany. Boccioni was not even from Milano. You know what I mean? It's like, if you decide to make art or anything here, you're Milanese, you're contributing to the city, you're the nobility of the city. So and what I'm trying to say is that you have to be politically with your work. You know, it's not only about technology or reality, it's about politics in what you say. And that's another thing. I'm very proud of this. This is a sofa, okay? And it's actually one of my first projects. When I went to the producer of this sofa, which was the #1 at the time, I went there with, let me see if there is a pointer. No, there is not a pointer. Okay, let me explain you, okay? You see that it's like a DNA, brava. No. Me lo accendi? Grazie. So, you see, it's like one curve. then all the other connects. So that I brought this curve to the producer, to the company owner, and said, I came with the idea of a new sofa. And he said, Fabio, but it's a curve, it falls. I said, exactly, that's the point. Only one doesn't succeed anything. That's another point of view from myself. It's like, you have to be at least 2, 3 more people changes things together. It's not a single man thing. That's why probably in Italy we love soccer. You know, it's a team game. Life is a team game, and you have to play it properly. And you see that it's actually called the and, this sofa. And it's like a conjunction in English, right? But if you turn the word, if you mirror the word, it's DNA. It's like the DNA of a comprehensive generation, of an inclusive generation. And that's something I did with this sofa. And then I went through my works, and I found another very interesting thing. This is called F3, form follows function. In this case, the function was not just sitting. You know, this was another sentence from the architecture professor. You know, less is more, less is more. And then there was form follows function. Here, the form follows a mathematical function. You see, it's exactly like this. Look at this video. So it's like turning everything in numbers. You know, all the shape of this piece is in numbers. It's a formula, basically. So I went to the producer with a formula that gave birth to this object, which is quite interesting, right? I mean, I really think that transforming everything in numbers is a beautiful thing. Why not? I mean, I love the digital world. I'm not scared of the digital world. I told you, I'm a knight of physicality, but let's not forget, digital is in our lives, and I love it. And why it closed? Okay, this is another thing. It's more on the graphical thing. It's something I did for Adidas just recently. It's an adaptive font that can transform patches into anything you can write, all right? So you just give to the machine the word, and with this adaptive font, you can write whatever you want. I like that very much. It was used, of course, to work with big brands. It's interesting because you can arrive to big masses. And you can see all the important sport people from all over the world have been using it. And I like this image of sport related to what I do because I believe in an aura. I really believe in aura. This is a work I did in 2007 with Philips, and it was not so easy to deal with the LEDs and sensors. Here was like a pavilion, was like a big box made of LED, sensors, and timers. So you were entering the space, and the light was basically following you, stopping after a while. So that was really like an aura. I really believe that we all have an aura. It's very important. And plus, I really believe in surfaces. You know, Hofmannsthal, the great philosopher, used to say that depth is hidden on the surface. Something is going on there. Here I show you some surfaces so that my work, you see, goes from big scale to small scales, even surfaces. I know, this is the last thing. I'm on time. This is the last thing, are surfaces. And I wanted to show these surfaces because, as I told you, I cannot draw. I'm not a decorator. So that these are adaptive shapes that by themselves they create. Okay, by themselves they form the grid. I show you a little video after that. It's related also to Platonic solids. So Platonic solids and you will see it explains by itself. Sorry. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your time.
Mille grazie, Fabio. That's really cool. Does it keep going? Okay. Our second presenter is Joachim Sauter.
Okay. This was now the funny part of the evening. Now the German is coming. Sorry. And you already see it with the title. It sounds serious, but I hope you will enjoy it anyhow. So to explain that, I want to go shortly back into the early 80s to the advent of the digital revolution, at that time caused by the widespread of the personal computer. You all know there had been digital technology before, but then finally there was the critical mass to start a revolution. And I personally had been so interested into that I founded a studio in 1988, which is called Art+Com, together with other artists, designers, technicians, programmers, hackers. And since that 30 years, we are working in this intersection between art, design, and digital technology. So in the first 15 years, we mainly worked with light-emitting interfaces, where we showed our virtual content. So we worked with monitors, as you see on the left. I actually have a pointer. And with projections and with LED screens. So we used that light-emitting interfaces to communicate our virtual content. And 15 years ago, we then started to translate the quality of the digital into the physical world. So we started to work with code, with mechanics, and with electronics. At that time, we called it physical computing. So we went from the immaterial, from the virtual, into the physical world. And there was one project in 2005 which more or less shows literally this translation from the immaterial to the physical. It's an art piece we did in Tokyo, in the center of Tokyo. And there we translated light waves into water waves. So we came from immateriality and went to the physical. For this, we created a 4x4 meter LED floor. And if you're walking over, you create virtual ripples, which then become real ripples if they hit the waterfront. So we have this moment where you have the virtual going directly into the physical, so very literal. So we came from the immaterial LED stuff and went down to the actuators. And this was something very interesting for us. So we start working in all these physical output interfaces. We worked, as you see, with material. And in the meantime, there are already some terms, more or less clever ones, coined for that. So we have the term phygital, which is a combination between physical and digital. I don't like it because it sounds a little bit like a disease. But we also have near-physical, post-virtual, near-analog, and I usually use the word post-digital. So the very first purely post-digital work we did was a commission in 2008 for the BMW Museum. And they asked us to make an installation at the very beginning of the exhibition dealing with car design. So our first idea was probably we can create a dynamic surface in space which we can bend, which we can twist, and with this we show over time how a car is designed. There was no material like this out there. So we did a lot of experiments and we came up with spheres on ropes driven by motors. And with this, we then created this kind of installation. So what you do first is always doing a test setup, on one hand, to understand if the technology is working, if it's precise enough. But what is more importantly is that we learned a lot how to tell stories with that. So is this a medium or a technology which allows you to tell a story in that case, in a very emotional way, a poetic way, more or less. So no one did it before, so we had to make all these tests, and actually they had been successful, so we could realize the whole thing. And we learned a lot about how to create a storyline, how to create a choreography. And I have 2 minutes compilation out of the 15-minute choreography, which more or less shows the emotional value of the installation. So we then started working in this field a lot. Okay. So we actually did a lot of these installations, and I heard you had your conference last year in Singapore, and probably you have seen one of these because they are both in Singapore airport. If not, I recommend to go there. It's really worth. Beside all this physical stuff, we're also working with monitors. Sure, we are media designers, media artists, and as you can see, we like to work with augmented reality, where we can connect the virtual world with the physical ones. But even there, we try to translate this in the physical space and more or less use choreographed and dynamic monitors in space to augment information into space. So one example is a project we did last year. Actually, I did it at Villa Massimo here in Rome. And it's now in a research center close to Munich. And my idea was to hang Raphael's School of Athens into the building, because it shows all the important thinkers, philosophers, scholars from the ancient Greek up to the Renaissance, and why shouldn't they see the shoulders of the giants they're standing on? But for sure, I wouldn't hang a replica into the space. So instead, I used a pendulum which reveals the painting over time. So I went there 2 weeks after the opening, and at that time they already named their spaces after the 21 philosophers shown on that building. Sorry, on that picture. Okay, to sum up, in the 80s, with the widespread of the digital computer, with the personal computer, we saw the digital revolution, and let's say a decade ago, we then entered the post-digital area where we translated we're translating the qualities of the digital into the physical world, into the physical objects, but now loaded with a lot of technology and designed with digital thinking. Thank you very much. Can you come back? I shortly want to, if you can go back to the, so if you have time, so by accident, the drawings of Raphael, they are exhibited at Bibliotheca Ambrosiana here around the corner. I really recommend to go there. So,
Thank you. I like the collaborative spirit. It's very cool to see. So our third presenter is Franziska. So do you want to stand, or you are okay sitting here? What is most comfortable for you?
I follow the tradition and go over there.
Okay, that's what we're doing then.
So thanks for inviting me to quickly present my work, which I have the privilege of doing at Frankfurter Kunstverein, which is at the very heart of Frankfurt, a city which is not known as one of the most beautiful maybe in Germany, but is mostly known for its bank, for its business, for its fastness, for its toughness. And I have the privilege of doing a job which is called contemporary art curation. And I sense that it has a meaning to quickly understand or make it understandable what that means. Basically, I spend my time with a lot of contemporary artists who research in very different fields And some of my field of interest, or at least the fields of interest of the artists that I work closely with, is, for example, in digital culture, or with artists, and I'm going to quickly navigate you through a couple of examples, with artists that are very informed by methods of current scientific work or disciplines. So I take the occasion of an exhibition that we just opened 10 days ago in our institution. We do 4 exhibitions a year. We have looked at phenomena of our contemporary society, like perception in the times of virtual reality, for example, or artificial intelligence. And we run these things through the gaze of contemporary artists that have a very specific way of looking at things. Yes. Here we worked with an Indonesian artist for a sculpture on the facade. Therefore, we work also outside of our institution. And the exhibition that I would invite you to quickly visit with me in this non-physical, non-spatial way is an exhibition called Trees of Life, in reference to visual metaphors that you all might be familiar with from the context of science. The opening is a setting that also gives a theoretical kind of like introduction to what the artists that we invited and some of the exhibits that we invited to meet in the same space would be about. And it's thinking together how we as humans have a very specific way of looking and of making reality, of making sense out of what we perceive in our world. An animal, a plant, would definitely perceive things through its bodiliness completely differently. But being in an era which is called Anthropocene, the question nowadays we all pose ourselves, what is so specific? Why do we relate with everything that surrounds us in such a unique way that creates also some issues? So what we try to set is kind of like a thinking space which quickly runs through some of the main ideas of our Western human thought history, which is the Scala Naturae, for example, of Aristoteles, drawn by Charles Bonnet, or Haeckel's visualization of what we thought of being a tree-like evolution of all the beings, up to the sketches of Darwin. One zoom, and the prior slide was showing David Hille's visualization of what over time developed, so to say, as our knowledge and thinking of how a systemic being on this planet could be visualized. The exhibition was actually an experiment for us people from the contemporary art field, because we invited our colleagues from the Museum of Sciences, that's the Senckenberg Museum in Frankfurt, which is part of a huge cluster. It's a scientific cluster that buries many different faculties and 800 scientists, all investigating on the topic of biodiversity. And we had the privilege to access a collection of 40 million items of the 3 museums that in Germany are owned and run in different cities by the Senckenberg Society. And one of the pieces that I wanted to, so to say, star, and at the beginning of the exhibition, is a fossil tree, approximately 225 million years old, and with a weight of 1.5 tons. As for me, as it looks like being a sculpture designed even by an artist, as of its colorfulness, as of its massive physical presence in space. We kind of used to invite artists to work digitally, but in this case, it's not an artist who created this immersive space, but it's a science project that tries to visualize the life which is present, or which takes place in only one drop of water, if we take that drop of water from a healthy river or a healthy lake. So a lot of little animals are surrounding the space in which visitors can move freely, trying to experience how these monocellular beings interact. And here we meet the first artist that we invited. It's Sonia Boomer. She is an artist that is now working in Amsterdam, and what her assumption is, from which she started several years ago, her investigation, is the microbiome. The fact that, that we as individuals are not an identical, a one-piece living being, but half of the cells that form our system is non-human, is composed by microbes. So she uses the surface of her skin as the starting point from which she develops paintings, works, and that she gives a visual form in space, living, so to say, developing over the time of the exhibition. Here she created a print, a three-dimensional print of her body. She put some agar on it, and she disposed her own microbiome of her own skin on top, and this is developing over the period of the 4-month exhibition. Of course, there's a lot of iconographic references that we, if we want, even here in Milan with the traditional imprint of Jesus' face, but where she comes from is actually all these theoretical, scientific investigations about the symbiotic intertwinements of organic and living and non-living entities on a planet. And therefore we decided to here again juxtapose an object from the collection of the Science Museum together with a movie, a 3-hour movie, which is quite challenging for some of our visitors, but a lot of them stay, they really endure, which tells the story of our planet seen through the acknowledgements, through the research of Lynn Margulis, a fine scientific researcher, microbiologist. She passed away, but she developed with James Lovelock the Gaia theory. And we identified an object that would express, so to say, exactly the period of time and the microbiotical life on Earth 2 billion years ago, which developed the oxygen in the stratosphere. So there was a physical witness in space of something that the microbiologist was trying to explain, or very well explain, through her language and through her knowledge and through data. So what we try to do here is to create something that becomes tangible, that becomes an object, a material object in space. This is the movie that has been released last year and I think premiered at the Oxford University on the life and on the research of Lynn Margulis. And here again we meet an artist. It's an artist that is a filmmaker, but he actually engaged a year ago to create a non-governmental organization where he invites people to join an association to buy land as a community activity and to return this land to non-productive use by humans. So he wants to raise attention to the fact that ownership is definitely a topic that we need to rediscuss when we know that land is the basis, it's a living corpus in which the microorganisms, insects, animals of all kind need to survive on. And we just opposed this project, which is, it's basically a participatory thing which had no tangible objects in the space. But we just opposed it with the collection of 1880 from the University Heidelberg, in which the same idea of how do we engage, how do we make sense, how do we classify with insects, just opposing it with an artistic position that looks more to a political current approach. We also introduced the idea of where all the origins of life and the elements come from, of course, from space, from meteorites. And in order to, here again, create different ways of approaching it, we showed some found footage from the meteorite fall in Chelyabinsk in 2013, thanks to some dashcam citizen video footage, or also through some virtual reality, more immersive experience. And this created a perfect bridge, in our opinion, to here again an artist work by an artist duo called Studio Drift. They're working in Amsterdam, and what they do is they reverse engineer production objects of our industrial culture. What we selected with them for the exhibition are 6 pretty iconic items. For example, a Kalashnikov, which is here in the forefield of the image. What they do is they disassemble these objects, they purchase them, they disassemble them, they understand the different elements of which they are composed, they dissolve them, and then they recompact them into these very geometric forms, connecting it to an awareness of all the objects that we use daily and of which we tend to forget the origins and the connection with our planet. So for example, here they decompose an iPhone, which then is presented in this sort of way in the exhibition as an exhibition piece. So here I think you start to see how artists have different ways of trying to present angles of thought of something which in science, in politics, in the social sciences at the moment is roughly or hardly is debated, and we try to find ways to physically translate them and to make it into an experience that the public can also remember in terms of imageries. At the end of this parcours through the museum, we present Dominique Koch's work. She's the one who gathers more the theoretical part. She's a filmmaker, but here again we try to create again spaces in which theoretical knowledge becomes more tangible. And I think as a quick run through, we have been very brave, because normally our visitors need 2 hours to see this exhibition. So 10 minutes was a very good way how to try to get into it. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
And thank you for taking us through that so quickly. Appreciate it. Simona?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invite. Very excited to be here. Can you hear? Yes. Yeah. As Fabio, I'm also a little bit wondering why am I here, because I'm really not coming from the field that most of you share. I'm actually from near Milano, studied architecture, and spent almost 25 years now working with digital technologies and looking at how technology can actually improve the life of people. So a little bit of a feel of what our place in Copenhagen looks and feels like. It's a lot about prototyping. Well, now there is no music. It's the music that you had before. We believe in making, in prototyping, in learning by doing. So these are all experiences that are shaped around the life of people. We look at technology as a medium, not as a goal. And for us to understand the role of technology in everyday's life, the only way to do it is to co-create with the people who should actually benefit from it. So from the very beginning of the innovation process, we involve everyone through the prototyping process to bring their contribution. Regardless of the expertise, the background of everyone coming to the table, whether you're an architect, an engineer, an anthropologist, a doctor, a teacher, anyone can understand through the tangible world. So that's the power of prototyping. And that's for us is like creating a common language to unlock the knowledge and the expertise of everyone. You're very welcome to visit us in Copenhagen. For the last 20 years, we've been focusing on the idea of being people-centered, human-centered. The worst version of it, they're called customer-centric or user-centric, even worse again. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm a user. We're a father, a mother, a worker. But this idea of putting people in the center as a way to shape new experiences for them by using technology. But right now we know it's straight up in our face, thinking a bit of the climate change and every kind of emergency we're living in the moment, that just by focusing on people and using technology to improve the life of people, we have ended up in the wrong place for the planet. So we're in this transition, moving from being people-centered into being life-centered. We're at the center of the innovation process, and the goal for technology should be to maintain the life of the ecosystem of any living element in the system. It's quite interesting. So we're moving from thinking of how to grow the system, also having a very financial, commercial kind of approach to growth, into a system where the most important focus should be on how to maintain the system and regenerate it. So from growth to maintenance. This is a picture from Copenhagen. I don't know how many of you have been there, but I thought it could be quite interesting to look at the role of technology and especially the role of data, which is quite a key message in my whole presentation. It's actually during my commute every day. Also this morning I took a picture like this. It's like the traffic light, you mostly have bikes. Copenhagen has a vision of being without cars by 2025. They're very dedicated to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. And it's interesting because it's not, always fun to be on a bike. I mean, it's a very cold place. It rains, it snows, it's very windy. But I love this beautiful little intervention of technology. This little kiosk is counting every single hour, moment, in every single time. Basically, it's telling you what number you are that day, what number, in terms of being a cyclist. So as you pass by this crossroad, you see the number changing. So that's you in the system of the city. That's you being part of a bigger community of people who are biking to work, they're biking to school, and by being part of such a movement, they make the city the sustainable city that it is and it stands for. So this idea of using technology to enable the participation of all and giving a role to everyone. So we're moving from the idea of innovation as being something that is centralized, closed, very secret, controlled by a few in a room, to a situation where innovation is actually an enabling platform for society, for everyone involved. So this idea of once again, moving from managing a few resources secretly into an idea of orchestrating everyone in an open way. This is a project by Bjorn, which I love. It's a bit of a provocation. A lot of the I brought a lot of cases, also given that we are in between your day and your dinner, so it's nice to keep you, and many of you might also be jet lagged. So this is Alias. It's like actually a 3D printed prosthesis, an accessory that you put on your smart home appliance, Google Home or anything you might have. So you put it on top, and these things actually creates a little noise, so that the home device is actually very confused by the data that it's collecting. And when you make this device, it's completely open source. You can find this called Alias. You download an app, and you 3D print this little head for the device. And basically, you hack the system. This is done with Google Home. And you give like a new name. So you don't call it OK Google, but you call it OK Fabio, OK Franziska, OK Joachim. So you give a new name, and the system only unlocks when you call it with the name that you have given. So then when you call it with the name that you have given, the thing will stop making the noise and actually listen to you and interact with you. So it's kind of hacking the system. This is another project using data. So imagine when you use your smart device or Fitbit, whatever you use to count your steps or to measure your fitness performance and so on, when you look at yourself in the mirror, those data will be reflected in the mirror in 5, 10, 15 years' time. So if you are behaving with your diet and exercise and so on, you look really great for the next years to come. But it's sometimes, this is all to kind of, I like the idea of being optimistic with data. I believe there are way more potentials to create positive impact than negative. But also this idea of taking away the drama and play a little bit in the everyday. This is a project for IKEA where basically we're looking into how to make more sustainable living within households. So it's a shower that when you take the shower in the morning, will just start like going, it'll show a little red light when you are just 1 minute before your average amount of consumption of water. So it's just a nudge. It's not stopping the water. It's not making the water cold for you, but it's just giving you a signal that if you stop now, you are actually improving your kind of consumption or having a bit more of a more sustainable behavior. Once again, it's not about imposing. It's about nudging. It's about enabling people to actually be aware of their impact on the environment. This is about using data about energy. So the blue color is representing water, and the red color is representing heating and cooling. And we're transforming data into art. So think about maybe buying a piece of art, which you like because of the pattern, the drawing, the sketch, and so on. But as you use your water and your energy, if you're not behaving, the piece of art will disappear. So basically, yeah. And also connected to your Fitbit or anything, when you come home in the evening, if you haven't walked enough, the chairs will be a little bit tilted. You can sit and it will just go flat again. But it's about how can we make data tangible in our everyday. Often we just go through life thinking, yes, of course I want to be sustainable, of course I care for the environment, but we don't always know in our very everyday what are the small actions we can take to change that. And just to be a bit provocative, big talks about data in our lives, privacy, how is all our data used by all these high-tech giants and so on. This is a provocation from Can, a Turkish student. Actually, very nice to say that it's an anthropologist, it's an archaeologist by training, who looked at the use of data once we are dead. So all of us, all of these people in the room, once we will be dead, our data will be available. Maybe we can leave it available. Maybe we can keep it with us in our cemetery space. But what if the cemetery became a place to tell the story of people who lived in that area? So what if you went around the cemetery and rather than just looking at the berries, how do you call them, you actually get the stories told. Sorry, the audio is not on, I think. Can we have the audio? Michael? Hello? So I'll just... So as you walk through the cemetery, you are told the story of the baker, the pharmacist, the people who lived there and died there. Imagine if kids, children from schools, could actually use cemeteries as a way to learn about the history. Yeah, this is a video of what I
Marvin,
showed.
what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything?
The answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42.
Doris, where is Nemo?
Right now in Vesper Township, United States, it's minus 6 degrees Celsius with partly cloudy skies. Today's forecast has partly sunny weather.
To set up your alias, open the app and think of a name or even sound you want to activate your smart device with. Simply hold record while saying the new name 4 times. Alias, 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 alias. Now press train and wait a few seconds while alias is learning its new name. Okay. Alias, what time is it?
8:39.
Okay, Google, what time is it?
And it's all about, for us, it's all about co-creating the use of technology with the people who will actually use it. Technology is not imposing the behavior, but should be enabling new behaviors which are co-created. In this case, we have Francesca, the lady. We were working with Velux, a Danish company making windows for the rooftop situations. And these guys are normally mounting windows in their everyday life. And we were asked to use augmented technology, augmented reality, mixed reality, to make it easier for carpenters and people to actually mount the windows. So for us, the first thing to do is to actually go in the field and work with these people to understand their challenges, rather than thinking with technology in a sort of isolated room or just thinking theoretically. These are projects that you will see quite soon by Toyota. And they all start with body storming. Brainstorming is about creating many ideas with your brain. But we believe a lot in body storming, especially when it comes to the use of technology. Just like starting by simulating the use of a car just by using chairs and simple, very low fidelity prototypes with papers and so on. This is a project which puts innovation at the center of the back seat for the kids. Most of our kids are sitting with tablets and iPads when they're in the car. And the idea is how can we make the environment around the car as you go through a journey to be the inspiration for new learning? So how can the car actually be a vehicle to learn and not just to travel? And the interface, the window becomes an interface and so on. I think I'll stop here. The key question is moving from how might we, in terms of how could we use technology to do something, to the why should we? And prototyping can be very, very keen in understanding also futures that we might not want for ourselves or for our planet. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Simona. So, I never, is this still on? Okay, great. Yeah, I never, for the life of me, thought I'd see something that made me actually want to go to IKEA. So it's that was good. So I promised Laura and Anna that we would finish up around 7:30. So we still have some time. With the space that we have available to us, I wanted, I guess, to do two things. One was to put a question to our four presenters and practitioners, a common question, and then very briefly then a specific question that speaks directly to the work that they presented for us this evening. And I guess my general question, and we can start with you, Joachim, and just sort of go around, is, when we think about the history of technology and we think about how central engineering is to it, a key component of that is always future thinking. I mean, engineering is grounded in thinking about the future because, whatever you're engineering is going to be built at some point in the future. I wanted to reverse that, especially given the presentations that I saw this evening, and ask you to just say very briefly something about how history or the past informs the work that you're doing, because all of you are doing work that has this future-looking component. But as I'm watching it, I can see shades of history there. But I'm thinking for the audience, it might be nice to explicate that a little bit further, if possible.
Actually, you have to know the past. If not, you can't predict the future. I think that's obvious. So, I say in my work, as you probably have seen in the last picture, I'm referring with a lot of other works which I haven't shown to the Renaissance. Renaissance is something which actually we in the last 20 years we lived in a Renaissance 2.0. This was in the 90s the big topic, and I think it's right. So there's a big paradigm through digital technology, and actually learning from the behavior, the attitude, the strategies of the Renaissance was something very important for me. To not distinguish between art, design, and technology, to say thinking everything as a holistic moment. This is what I personally learned about that, and it's reflected not only how I'm working, but you see a lot of Renaissance paintings in my work.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to suggest another angle, and the question for me is, where does the past begin and end? I mean, there's also a question of perception of where are we and how do we think of what we have lost. There's a lot of nostalgia lately that I hear, that I sense also, and when I speak to artists and in the community in general, there's this, we're moving ahead and we are losing so many things that we had in the past. And my question is, which past? I mean, talking about nature, it's a process. It's a process that has taken place, and we as humans are only aware of a very short moment in this historic changes. So it's always good to maybe look into which perspective we are trying to get hold of ourselves. To put that into scale. And I think a lot of artists are out there trying to do that, exactly. So measuring against what is always a question that I find very useful.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to pass this over to Fabio.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, Franziska is very right. What is history? I mean, we always talk about Renaissance, it's only 500 years ago. I mean, it's like, what is history? It's true. But on the other way, I speak as a designer myself, so I consider God as a designer. And I say, okay, we have a front, we have two sides, we have one back, we can only move forward. I always say that. Okay, we can only evolve. Yeah. And because if we walk backside, I mean, it's like we fall, right? So that we must be aware that we can only go on, but at the same time, we have to know where we're coming from. And everybody chooses his own reference. For example, I always say that your ancestors, you can choose you can choose not necessarily your grandpa, your grandma, and whatever. You know, Leonardo da Vinci for sure is chosen by a lot of us as their own grandpa. You know, he's the first scientific man. Actually, when it comes to mixing everything, I always think about Leonardo da Vinci. You know, for him there was no division between being an artist, a painter, a sculptor, a scientist, a designer. I mean, everything together. You know, that's probably why we always go back to Renaissance, because it was mixing everything at the same time. That's why 500 years is almost enough to say we're humans. But it's true. It's true. I mean, it was 225 million years. The trunk was very inspiring, I must say.
Yeah, interesting. It's the last slide that I couldn't talk about was exactly about this. So thank you for that. Personally, I think like right now, and most of the projects we've seen today, I think are showing that we're in a sort of still like, what do you say, waking up from the consequences of the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, the combination of being a craftsman, an artist, a scientist, someone would make sense of the technology that you had, of the geography, of the resources, was just a natural process. Being part of the problem settings, scouting new challenges, being inspired to build new solutions and actually build the solutions, were much more connected. After the Industrial Revolution, technology and especially the economies of scales are dictating the logic of the machines that need to work and need to perform in order to deliver. And all of a sudden we become, also education is more about either you are a scientific mind or you are a creative mind, you're more of a artistic or economist and so on. I think right now we are paradoxically in this very age closer to a paradigm of that happened before the Industrial Revolution, where situations, the making, the thinking of the future is very much based on trust, on transparency, on co-creation, but with the power of the digital world. I don't know if it makes sense. So before the Industrial Revolution, if you think of the craftsmen working, they would know each other, they would trust each other, they would try, make mistakes, fail, try again. There was a lot of transparency and trust in place. And today, I guess, we are living a similar dynamic, but with new potentials.
I would say, just to confirm what she said, that Gutenberg made Renaissance possible. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, the most luxurious design was books. You know what I mean? It's like, instead of buying a Ferrari, in the past, buying a book was the most expensive thing. So when Gutenberg arrives with the mobile characters in order to print a book, that's real democracy. That's why Renaissance starts. So that it's true. I mean, it's totally true. We're going back exactly to the time, and our Gutenberg is the digital, you know, is the Silicon Valley.
You can hand that back to Simona, because I'm going to start the individual questions, I suppose, with you, which is, before we came on stage, we were talking a little bit about your work and about thinking about innovation and creativity as an open process, and this idea of bringing people other than who we traditionally view as inventors into the process, you know, resonates very much with a lot of the research and teaching that people here in this room do, of trying to show innovation as something that speaks to a broader community, but then also encompasses a wider range of activities such as reuse and recycling and fixing things and so forth. And I was just curious how this resonates with your curatorial practice, because you're dealing in something that in a sense is not just like technical design, but also a social design as well. So if you could say something to that, please.
Yeah, actually, I'm not an expert of technology per se, but I like the idea of thinking of technology as a medium, and a medium that should create meaning in people's life. So the only way to actually do that is then to bring the people, as you said, not the experts or the inventors, but the everyday people into the process of creating those solutions with technology. And once again, it's exactly as it happened before the Industrial Revolution. So everyone is an expert. Everyone is the expert of his own, her own life. So we should be part of saying what makes sense in our lives. And especially today when we talk about, I mean, there is of course a big wave of new discussions around ethics and technology. If you look at, and that's also the provocation of Alias, if you look at most of the policies and a lot of the interventions also from big companies and big corporates and brands, first they develop the technology, then eventually the application, and then they think about the ethics with a lot of reactive actions, whether it's a policy, again, or like a change in the terms and conditions of Facebook or something. And it would be lovely if we could think of like building the ethical framework for new products and services as we craft the actual product or service together with the people.
Okay. So, can we do the 4 and then we can come back if we have time? Okay. So, pardon?
It's very American.
Ah, that's a line. So my question for Fabio is, one of the things that a lot of us have our undergraduates read is this classic paper from around 1980 that talks about the politics that are inherent in artifacts and the way that politics gets built into the design of things. And I was wondering if you, on the basis of some of the works that you showed us, could just maybe give us a brief glimpse into any sort of, I think we saw with the one piece, but maybe some of the others of it, certain political thoughts, either at a very local level or, as big as you would like to say.
Yesterday or 2 days ago, there was Joseph Kosuth in Milano. He's one of the biggest artists and one of the most charismatic thinkers of our time. But apart from Joseph Kosuth, for example, Rammellzee, the first graffiti artist in the United States, used to define his work iconoclastic panzerism. Because whatever you just paint on a wall in the street, it becomes a political statement. Everything we do is a political statement. Actually, I grew up with Marshall McLuhan. You remember the big slogan of Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. I don't agree completely. I don't totally disagree. Because the medium is the medium and the message is the message. And actually, I totally agree with Simona, because the medium is a tool. Which kind of message you want to deliver? And everything gets political. Everything you do, every choice you do, our life is a political statement, because any choice, and we have to select many decisions in an ordinary day that are our political statements. Like for the biker in Copenhagen, realizing that so many other people use the bicycle, make him think, I'm not the only stupid around. You know what I mean? It's like, that makes a huge difference.
Franziska. So I wanted to ask you more of a curatorial question, because I also know that some of the people who were here for the meeting come from the museum community. And I wanted to ask you a question that was maybe speaking more to issues of conservation. With some of the works that you were showing, that just struck me as something that might be extremely problematic. So I was wondering if you could say something about the curatorial practices associated with working with some of the pieces that you showed us.
Well, our museum doesn't have a collection, so the conservation part regards taking care of it, that there's no damage. Yeah. But I would like to express, after hearing Simona talk, I think the big leap that we are experiencing now is that technology is not always visible anymore. There's a lot of technology that is changing, that is making groundbreaking changes for us as individuals and for us as society in a global scale that is not tangible, it is not physically visible anymore. It's not about the device, it's not about what I have in my pocket in the phone, it's about artificial intelligences, for example. And I can raise also your attention, and I know that you already visited it, to the exhibition that Trevor Paglin is co-curating, I think, at the Fondazione Prada, and we're looking exactly at these topics. What is happening right now? What is changing our society? What is changing also the assumption of our future, how do you say? The ground of our work, of us working or being able to work in future or being replaced by other entities. How cities and communication is going to function. All these things are going to dramatically change. So in my curatorial practice, it's very small, but it's attempts of trying to visualize something which is per se not visible, it is not physical. And to have that happen in a space where we get together as bodies to interact, to communicate about it, and to get a certain sense of awareness about these things. It's a challenge, but I think there's where also the political, I believe that not everything is political in our life. I believe that certain things are and others not. They are private, and I'm happy that they are private. And therefore, in a public space, as a museum, yes, I like to think that the work that we do needs to be aware of a certain impact on society. If it's political, others will judge.
Grazie. Your reference to materiality actually just segues perfectly into Joachim's things, so thank you for doing my work for me. But I want to pivot in a different direction. I think this is going back to something maybe Simona said in her talk, or maybe it's just something I scribbled down in the process of listening to the four of you. But all of you seem to be intent on telling stories with the work that you're doing, and of course, crafting narratives and telling stories is fundamentally what our community here does. And I was wondering if you could say something about this in terms of the kinds of stories that you are telling with your work, because in one of the email exchanges that you sent to me, you said, in a time where information at any time is accessible immediately, poetry comes back to focus. And I thought that also might be a nice note to...
So actually, yeah, okay. Actually,
Take it away.
As you said, in a time where we have any kind of information at any moment, anywhere in the world, on the fingertip, easily digestible, there is a kind of, let's say, a desire for other ways to communicate, to tell stories. So, and I think poetry is a quite appropriate strategy in strokes, because it means that we are deciphering, we have to decipher, we are encrypting information. A poem is nothing else than using a language which you have to decipher. It's not this direct, digestible information you get with Googling. And this is what I try to incorporate in my work, to say, okay, you have to decipher, and if you decipher, you are deeper into the communication as if you are perceiving it in an easy way. So I think we have two renaissances at the moment. One is the renaissance of the physical as a reaction onto the virtualization of our world, and the other is the renaissance of poetry as a reaction onto the easy digestible information we have around. The problem, or let's say the challenge, is to motivate people to decipher, because they are not really used to decipher anymore. So beauty can be a starting point for that, and this is more or less a strategy which I also try to incorporate into the work.
I think that's a wonderful note with tangibility and poetry to end our plenary session on. I'd very much like to thank the four of you. I know my timekeeping was perhaps overly draconian, but I hear noise outside which indicates a reception is beginning to get underway. So thank you all very much, and thank you for being here today.